Mr. DJ, how's it going out there? We sound good? We in 5x5? Last time I did the Scottish Summit session, I was doing it from my home office. And now I'm here in person live. So yes, our topic today is making all your scheduling dreams come true. And today we're going to talk about, obviously, scheduling and just the scheduling engine that's inside of the Dynamics platform and how we can leverage it maybe as Power Apps or, kind of what is kind of the core functions and features. And let me fix this before we even start because it looks like I'm going to be using rehearsed timings and we don't want to do that. We want to turn that off. There you go. So I'd like to thank our sponsor, the people that pay my mortgage, Microsoft, and a couple of our awesome partners. I see we have SA Global here today, but HSO, PwC, Proximo, who without them, none of this would have happened probably. Great folks there, Docs 42, Applied Information Sciences, Thing Clouds, Experian, Incremental. How do you say this first company? How would you say that? Oh, DQ. But the companion?
Oh, Companion.
Companion?
Yeah.
Companion?
They used to be called QBS.
Oh, okay. Nice. ATEC, TISC, Ski, and Squared Up. My role at Microsoft is I'm a chief explainer. So I work on a corporate team. And I've been in the field as a global black belt at Microsoft for 7 years and just recently moved over to this role. Microsoft last year hired 1,000 technical salespeople. So my job this last year has been sitting in my office during the pandemic, training for most of those folks are going through we call it a boot camp. It's an onboarding training. So the service sellers go through 3 weeks of every day. So this was a lot of fun. So I have been sitting behind that computer talking to and looking at people, showing them how to do demos and cloning my skill set as a global black belt for Microsoft. I've been in tech sales for a long time. 1988 is when I sold my first computer. So I've been doing this for a little while. And like I said, so I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on a lot of the social media components. And because we are in Scotland, I would like to start with my favorite part of Scotland. Scotland is the land of warriors and poets. And Robert Burns, my favorite poet of all times, is Scottish. And this is from Ode to a Louse. Ode to a Louse. This is just one of the stanzas. Oh, would some power give us the gift to see ourselves as others see us? You have to have a little bit of a brogue when you say Scottish poetry because it doesn't rhyme in Midwestern English. You have to have a bit of a brogue. It would from many a blunder free us, and foolish notion what airs in dress and gait would leave us. And then the other one, which is all about money. Weigh worth thy power, thou cursed leaf. Fell source, oh, a may woe and grief. For lack o' thee I've lost my lass, for lack o' thee I scrimp my glass. I see the children of affliction, unaided through thy crust restrictions. I've seen the oppressor's cruel smile amid the hapless victim's spile, and for thy potence vainly wished to crush the villain in the dist. For lack o' thee I leave this much-loved shore, never perhaps to see great old Scotland more. This is from his lines written on a banknote. So, this was, I imagine, what my forefathers said because our family's from Scotland, and this is what they probably said as they left Scotland for better days, and went to go cut down trees and help build Chicago. Basically, is what it came down to. So, anyways. So we're going to give you we're going to really talk about the scheduling engine. And where field service fits in this is that the core scheduling engine that is in Dynamics and in the Dataverse is from the field service application. So it's kind of an analog for how you can extend scheduling, how you can schedule anything. It's kind of the best example of all the little components that are inside of there. And so we'll talk about the scheduling and kind of why scheduling is like super important. So these are some of the observations that we get from different analysts and customers and things on that order that kind of help drive us. I'll just talk about a couple of things at the beginning here. That obviously remote work is a big deal, right? So the pandemic became like an acid test for companies who are centered and organizations that are centered around scheduling, because scheduling becomes now such a key part of coordinating everybody. And in the service business, especially the field service business, most of the service work is done in a customer's facility or someplace other than, where I start my day. And so the staff are working at home. So the ability to actually just to schedule somebody starting at their home, going to a customer, maybe stopping back at the shop to have a training meeting, picking up supplies, going back to facilities and traveling around a bit it's really much more complex than it's ever been. A couple other things in the service industry that are super important, really two facts. One of them, companies reported increasing service revenues. The companies that are, where service revenues increased during this period of time, 95% of them stated that they already had a service strategy in place. So they've already defined that within their companies. And of all of those companies, they stated that service was recognized as a growth engine actually in their organization, which is really interesting. Most companies, if you think of manufacturing, for example, and that's the next quote there, or the next little fun fact that we found out, that 50% of equipment manufacturers are really, this is why this is happening, they're slouching to offer outcomes-based services. So, and why is that important? That used to be about 15%, and it's going to 50%. So this is a giant change, This is seismic change. Companies are trying to get away from just selling a product through maybe a distribution and focusing on making money on the product. They're trying to make money on the experience of the product or selling the product as a service. So you don't actually own the product, you own the usage of a product. So what that means is, in order to do that, now I'm responsible to schedule all the maintenance, to manage all the services around that, and guarantee some sort of SLA or uptime on the product. So this is why scheduling all of this becomes important. It also is a big deal in companies that provide services. So one of our projects we did this last year was with G&J Pepsi. G&J Pepsi is a large Pepsi distributor. So they're going out into the shops and stocking and working through all of the challenges of making sure there's enough Pepsi and Mountain Dew products in your hotel room and all of this stuff. And for them, they are using a combination of Power Automate, Power Apps, and Dynamics Field Services as scheduling, the core scheduling engine within the system. And I found this quote out of them to be very interesting, the biggest opportunity they have to generate additional revenue. So we all know in different businesses, what's happening is productivity, there's a big push around productivity because it's hard to hire qualified people to go out and do this kind of work even. So stocking shelves in the store is hard to man people. So the only way that you can generate additional revenue in those organizations isn't by hiring more people. You have to take your existing staff and keep them out of driving around, get them out of meetings, stop sending them really crazy, here's a spreadsheet, go do all this work, report back to me. You're like, I need to take those tasks, I need to structure them, I need to put them in a system that is integrated with their schedule. And so scheduling becomes kind of the linchpin for productivity with that setup. So when we look at solutioning inside of this, this is where we want to focus solutions. Obviously, in the CRM or customer experience space, customer experience is really important, right? Having a great customer experience, delivering on the brand promise, etc. But in our solutions that we build, we want to make sure that we're really focused on optimizing the operational side of the organization and the workers' productivity. There's a lot of interesting studies that are done around the conversion or ROI of productivity. So if I go to a company in an organization, take mid-level managers in a company, and I say, hey, we're going to put in dashboarding so you don't have to send emails around and stuff like that, and we're going to give you back 45 minutes a day. It's hard to convert 45 minutes of executive time or a salaried person to revenue. But here's the interesting observation. Once I go down the organization in pay, and I put that frontline worker, and I give them 45 more minutes, they will do 45 more minutes of billable time or work. That's their world. So if I can take administrative functions and scheduling and coordination off of their plate and automate parts of that, I get a lot of productivity. So it's a lower ROI per person in terms of their wage, but I'm spreading it across. I look at a company like Walmart, literally 1 million employees, so if you think about the 1 million people that work at a Walmart around the world, if I can give them 10 extra minutes a day by improving the packaging or something like that of the way a store works, or reduce their email so they're not getting them in email, those convert to productivity in the store operations. So that's why scheduling becomes such a critical part of these things. I'm going to snip through these really quick. So these will be in the deck and stuff like that. Of course, some of the bullet points around some productivities, but the last one is a lot of times in the service business, sometimes it's not just about, an Uber driver showing up and not having to work through a dispatcher and, giving costs down and helping schedule the person. Sometimes it's also about the asset itself that's being serviced or the work that's actually being done. And so there's a big movement for us with lots of our customers to pay attention to scheduling signals that come off devices. So IoT, we call that IoT connected services, where a device that would be in this room, let's say the air handling unit, we're listening to the IoT signals and then we're predicting, hey, we need to go and fix this machine before it breaks. Because if it breaks, it's going to take longer to repair. Also, I can also reduce things like inspection and maintenance work if I can pay attention to the usage of something. So just like our car, we don't change the oil in our car every year. We change it based on how many miles we drive. It's usage-based maintenance. And so a lot of if I don't have the right systems, I'm not able to pay attention to the usage of something. I just know, okay, every 6 months, like in a building like this, a heating and cooling employee has to show up and inspect all the dampers in the building. That's an annual inspection. Well, this building is not occupied part of the year, and I can imagine during the pandemic it was very low occupancy, yet the contract compelled me by law that I had signed with this university. I had to send a guy out here to inspect every damper, even though they weren't being used. And so if we can pay attention to the usage of something, we can go, oh, we should send somebody out. So there's a big move for us around scheduling that not only takes signals from people, but I also want to take signals from things. So the heart of the scheduling system in Dynamics and in Power Apps or in the Dataverse, we have kind of a broad audience for this conference. So this is the schedule board experience that's inside Dataverse. I'll just use Dataverse for today. So if you have a scheduling system, and I'll talk about how you get this inside, what entitlements are there that get you this. This is the scheduling board. As you can see, it's graphical. It shows me where all the appointments are and the people. In there, I can sort all of those people and filter them out by their skill sets or the territory that they're in. We're paying attention to to all of these factors, and it allows folks that make scheduling decisions to manage and organize the resources that they have. This is one of the most complicated parts of Dataverse, actually, from a Microsoft viewpoint. How many here have opened up Visual Studio in the last, let's say, 2 months? Okay, so this is programming stuff. This is great because this is fetching. You're going out and pre-fetching. So imagine if I'm a company, one of our big customers like Hewlett-Packard, has 50,000 technicians globally that use this system. I'm a dispatcher here let's say I'm up in Edinburgh. I've got my little team of 10 people. When I go to the schedule board, I don't want it fetching 50,000 people's stuff. So I have to be able to pre-filter. When I load this screen up, it's got to know what resources. It's really amazing. So we've spent a lot of time on this, a lot of resources on this. It's gone through 2 major revisions. The current one now is default in the thing, and we're out there seeing a lot of uptick in usage of this. We'll talk a little bit more about this here in a second in just terms of what we're looking at. In terms of scheduling, the other part is that the mobile actually plays a big part in the scheduling performance. So from the field service viewpoint, again, as kind of like the biggest investment, and like here's the North Star if you're building a scheduling system, the mobile is important for this. What we found is that mobile not only gives that person doing the work in the field all the stuff they need to do on their mobile device, because they're out in the field, they don't usually use a laptop or something like that. And our telemetry shows, and again, that we're a little skewed towards the field service business, but about 30% of the users of the field service application do not use a computer, so to speak. They always use a mobile device. So they literally are running their day on their mobile device, which is kind of a mind shift for a lot of our internal developers. They, sit behind a computer all day. They're not out in the field, and so that mobile experience is always something that has to be worked on and improved. So we're giving telemetry off devices, as they're showing. So I've got the real-time IoT and the historical IoT data for whatever I'm fixing, so I can make my decisions. The folks out there doing the work are super smart. They just need to be armed with the right information. And then it's also advertising back to the application the location telemetry data. So it's saying, this is where I'm at. It's advertising back to Dynamics and to the Dataverse the real-time location of the technician or of that mobile device. So now I can use geofencing. I can build Power Automate to notify the customer when I'm showing up. He's on his way. Here's his picture. He's this far away. So in something like our Power Apps self-scheduling portal, which is part of this solution, is another great example. There's a whole Power Apps workflow on the back end that uses either the Twilio connection or just our native Outlook connection to send notification to the customer, just like Uber. Here, Mr. Customer, Pierre's on the way. Here's where his real-time location is. This is his picture. Here's the phone number if you want to get a hold of him. So again, this comes from knowing that we've got more people delivering stuff, doing service in the home than ever, right? People don't want to drive to the store anymore. So this is really interesting that the mobile actually plays an important part in terms of scheduling efficiency. The one thing I would say too in this area around notification and looping back information of the customer, one of the things that we found, and I learned this from, again, I'm from Michigan, which is the home of the world's worst pizza. I will not say that because this is being recorded. The home of the best pizza companies in the world. Both Domino's and Little Caesars is located in Michigan. They're both Microsoft customers, and we've been out there and talking to the service tracking folks, and they want to, they'll tell you if I'm getting pizza delivered to my house, they have a "Where's my pizza" app, right? You keep track of your pizza, and they get high degrees of customer satisfaction, and it's kind of like a brand experience and all of that. It's really exciting. But the real benefit isn't for the customer. The real benefit's for the company delivering the service. Anytime we're out doing service in the field, from a scheduling standpoint, I want to do the work right the first time. In the hardware fixing business, they call it the first time fix rate. Because what I want to keep track of is customers canceling. Customers don't show up. I'm now standing outside of the door. I've got my pizza in hand and nobody's answering the door. Now what do? Do I wait? The guy's upstairs in the backyard mowing, or the kids are in the bath or something like that. And so their feedback is always that the customers love this because, hey, you just gave me an extra 5 minutes because now I can see, okay, I can go do this thing and I'll meet you at the door, right? And so it's kind of the same thing with mobile. It has a benefit to the customer, but it has a bigger benefit to me that I don't have to send another technician out, or the customer's ready for my visit when I arrive. And that gives me back a certain percentage of my organization. So you're keeping track of this customer canceled rate or first time fix rate as a KPI that you want to have inside of an app. So here's the core entity diagram for any sort of scheduling system inside a Dataverse. The first component is resources. Who are the people or the trucks that are going to do the work? What are those? What do they do? What are their working hours? What are the characteristics of those folks? In terms of, when we talk about characteristics, we're talking about their skill set, their ratings, they're certified, they're licensed, they passed the safety course this year, that kind of stuff. We're putting all of the characteristics or skills of people. And also that metadata back. My mobile is poking back into the system. Here's their location. Where were they yesterday? There's all sorts of usage around, again, that geodata for whether that's safety or incident like reconstruction. There was accident yesterday. Where was that person at when this event occurred? We have auditing. A lot of companies this is a big important piece of that component too. So this is core to the Dynamics platform and to the Dataverse platform. Resources. So when we look at customer service, that resource list of who's the right call center agent, what are their skills, there's features called swarming. Hey, I need all the electrical engineers. And it spins up a quick team site and invites all the engineers to a team site for a case. It uses this skill set. So if you've been in the dynamic CRM space, we've had a service scheduling engine that had resources before. We've deprecated that, and this is now the core component. Resources can be users. They also could be contractors. They can be crews. There can be a lot of different things within the system. Within the resources are called bookable resources in the entity model. And they have bookings. So there's I love this entity. It's called a bookable resource booking is what they call this as an entity. And that is effectively the old appointment entity. And that's what shows up on the schedule is called a booking. And the booking is this kind of join between the resource and the work that needs to be done. Now, the out-of-the-box entity that we have in Dynamics for that is the work order, but I'm going to show you in a minute. You can do any entity inside of the system. So you can build a custom entity, you can do cases, leads, whatever you want to do. You can make them all schedulable entities. Underneath whatever entity that you choose, work orders in this case, there is another little entity called the resource requirement. And the resource requirement contains what is the skill that I need? What is the time? Do I need somebody to show up at a location? So there's a GPS latitude and longitude field in there that it inherits from some record inside of the system. Of course, being Microsoft, we've got to throw everything else in there. So the work order contains a lot other things other than just the schedule, like, what's the invoice and what's the billable time on this and what assets and photos and all of that. So it's a pretty sophisticated component within that. It has a bunch of workflows and plugins and whatnot that kind of populate all of this and manage the kind of life cycle of that work order within the system. But really at the core, what we're really talking about, we've got resource, bookings, and an entity within the system. Those, when we look at the schedule board, that's what we're looking at on the schedule board. The resources are on one side. I can filter those out. I can build views within the system. There's tabs along the top. When we look at the tabs up here, these tabs are able to, up in this area here, the tabs are effectively pre-filtering out the list of resources, so I can find my Edinburgh electricians and see only 10 and not 50,000 people. So that's that kind of pre-caching that's happening in the background. There's filtered views down here. These all are related to a view in the system that goes, and these are those resource requirements. Remember we were talking about resource requirements? That's the ones that are not scheduled yet. So I can, and then over the bookings or those appointments sit in the middle. The system is calculating some sort of drive time because those bookings have or can have, if you make them you can make them location agnostic. So we've got definitely some folks that do that where they schedule into the shop, so I'm getting work that comes in, service orders, let's call it, or case queues or something like that. So I can schedule when customers come in to my shop, or if I go outbound, it will calculate travel distance and time and estimate that travel time for us. And one of the things we haven't figured out how to do yet is this resource here, this space right here. It also, in the scheduling engine, calculates the travel home too. So the start location and the end location of the resources put into the system and when they start and end their day. So we don't have a graphic we have this line to driving to, but that last one has a driving home kind of thing. So when you look at schedule board, you always see that component. And then obviously on the right-hand side, we're seeing that real-time location of the folks. So the little pictures show up of where they're at in real time. And I can drill in and see more information. These are all their routes. These are all the other resource requirements that are nearby. So if Brady calls in and says, hey, I'm canceling this thing today, I can kind of drill in geographically and find other bookings that could be available for him to do, and I can just manually book them. There's 3 different scheduling methodologies inside of the system. One is manually scheduling. I can just go down to the bottom, just drag one of those resource requirements right onto the schedule. That's one method. I can use a scheduling assistant, which is a wizard-based system. It takes that resource requirement, passes it through the wizard, basically, and filters out, who's the right resource, territory-wise, distance, all of that, and then filters that list down of here's my 15, Edinburgh electricians down to give me the 2 that have time available today that are within, an equitable driving distance. So it lets you make we call this white space scheduling. I'm looking at the schedule and I'm just making an intelligent decision personally. I'm scheduling into the white space. It doesn't take into account, well, what if I move this over to here and move this guy and then I could, save 4 miles. A lot of companies aren't really able to do that when you do this assisted scheduling. You're not looking at the what if scenarios. So that is where our RSO or resource scheduling optimization engine comes into play. That's the scheduling automation. It's an engine that takes all those resources and all those requirements and builds a schedule. It's an Azure-based service. It takes all that input, applies additional rules that you'd have to say, I only want to do high priority work orders, or I want to maximize the working hours or minimize the travel time. You have all these different kind of rules that you can put in there into that engine. And it uses, basically a bunch of brute force compute and AI components to come up with an optimized schedule. So it does all of that on the back end, and it's usually scheduled. And so when you look at an organization, this is one that this is in Melbourne, a utility company that I worked on when I was at GBB. This is the schedule that it would come up with. So what it's doing, a lot of organizations that do maintenance, where maintenance is like 80, 90% of their work, you know ahead of time all the maintenance I need to do in this building. I know this months ahead of time. And so you kind of put them in the pile of resource requirements, and then RSO basically goes finds, says, okay, we could move all 14 of those work orders and give them to Steve today. So Steve's just going to drive from his home to the first job site, and I've got enough work for him to stay on that job site all day. That's like what a dispatcher's dream would be, to be able to look at the thousands, and a lot of these organizations, it is thousands of work orders that they're working on. You know, they're working on, one of the customers we have, you'll see them in our stuff, Evaqua, they're a manufacturer, they service, they get it's 50,000 work orders a month that they're handling. You know, got a couple hundred technicians around North America that go out, and so the old Siemens Water Company, and so they make devices that purify and manage water. And so there's a lot of maintenance going out and inspecting stuff, not really sometimes fixing anything. It's just, does it work today? Sure it does. You know, just everything looks great. So having that big stuff come out. So it's a big engine in the background that works, and it comes out with. So this is, let me just click through this. We don't need to see the build. Isn't that exciting, all the things? Look how good I am at PowerPoint. It handles also predictive travel. So that's the other part that the RSO engine will do. You can turn on predictive travel. And so it's one thing to take, okay, this guy's going to start at home. You know, is he on one side of the town? I'm going to pick the work orders that have the least amount of travel time. Might not be distance, and time sometimes can be very different depending on where we're at. If we're, you know, driving to the airport at 5 in the afternoon, it's going to be different than 2 o'clock in the morning. So it has predictive travel in there. These are some of the AI components that are within the system. So predictive travel, we have that, I mentioned that resource optimization. There's a whole IoT connected field service component within Microsoft, a framework that we have that takes either IoT Central or IoT Hub and will connect those assets into the Dynamics platform. You don't have to use field service for this. It creates an asset and what we call an alert off of this. So it pulls off from the Logic app. There's a Logic app inside of there, or you could use Power Automate with IoT Central IoT Central to just create alerts inside of the system. And then those, you know, then can create a case or update your, you know, custom entity within the system. That uses anomaly detection within that system. One of the challenges, if you've ever done anything with IoT devices, is they're super chatty. They're really chatty. They're every 6 seconds is the default, and that thing is basically saying, here is my current state. I am in error every 6 seconds. So I can't just go error, create alert in the system. You know, it might be a day before I get out there or something. So it has to, so anomaly detection. The other part is, what is an anomaly? So this is a cognitive service in Azure that's being used to look at the baseline signal that something happens and go, oh, that's out of the baseline. So it kind of keeps a last, you know, 50,000, you know, signals that I got. This one is way over or way under that signal. And we're going to see more of this coming, because one of the challenges in that space as technologists is, you know, if you're the manufacturer, it's great. I get to know, well, here's the operating range of these different devices. It's hard for us, though, to not being an expert on dampers, to understand what's anomalous in that data stream. And so that's some magic that happens. So you'll see more with us around predictive maintenance in terms of the APIs that you can kind of turn on. So the same way you think about, we've been doing this for years now, like with visual. So you take a, you know, that kind of pool of pictures and say, here's all the pictures of this person, and then is this picture the same person or is it a different person? The yes, no, like, have you probably seen these, like, here's the pictures of all the blueberry muffins, and then here's a little puppy that's brown and has 2 big, you know, blue eyes. And so is this a blueberry or is it a puppy? Blueberry muffin or a puppy? So that cognitive service has been around in visual stuff for a long time. This is kind of the data version of that, basically looking at signals, comparing it to baselines, and then going, this is not fit in, one of these things is not like the other. We're seeing this too from manufacturers. We've had some really big partnerships that we've done where we do have manufacturers. Honeywell is one of them. They make a lot of building control services to do that. And Johnson Controls, same thing. They have connectors right into Dynamics in order to do that. So those are some of the AI that comes off devices that you might want to consider adding or making part of your solutions. The other part, what we're looking at here, is another component of scheduling, which is AI that relates to predicting based on unknown factors of why something takes longer to fix or longer to service than other things. So I believe my appointment and schedule is going to take an hour because it always takes an hour to do that work, that site visit for an inspection or a survey that I have to fill out, or we have insurance companies that just go out and schedule signatures. They need to capture a physical signature for pensioners we have every year you have to sign up for health care every year when you retire. So the retirees, the insurance company has to literally come to your home if you didn't fill the form out, and send it in. They'll sometimes do a home visit for that kind of stuff. Those home visits should only take 20 minutes. So what we can do, though, is learn based on closed bookings that here's a list of bookings that you have today that are probably not going to be completed on the time that you've estimated that. And it gives you all of the factors of why that would occur. Maybe the customer location is something that every time we visit that system, that customer, it's always longer, regardless of who shows up, or the resource that's doing this work, or the type of work that's being done. And so it's saying in here to a dispatcher, out of those 50,000 work orders, 99% of them are just fine. They're going to be all good. We've got our numbers down. We've got smart people, and we've got our estimates correct. So I want to manage, though, that exception list, that here's the 10% of those work orders today. So out of my couple hundred, here's the 10 that are going to be my trouble kids today. These are the ones that, for whatever reason, I'm going to have to accommodate that technician by making sure that that next work order that they have, maybe we move it to another person, or this one's going to take longer. What we find out is that what happens in these are things like you arrive on a job site and the piece of equipment might be in a locked room. And so regardless of who, I need a person to escort me to a piece of equipment. And there's no way to really put that in and say, oh, for this customer, add another 2 minutes, to the work. So, or Pierre's really bad at doing this work. Every time we send him out, it takes him twice as long as Jim. Jim is great at doing the work, and he takes less time to do it. So this uses machine learning to do that. It takes about 3 weeks worth of data before it will actually generate the schedule. If you're in the demo business of trying to demo, this is really impossible to demo because we don't have enough demo data in this, so it's really crazy. So I have to, every time I want to demo this, I have to ask the developers to go log into my system and give me your demo data set, because it needs closed data, within the system. So you can't just import it, you need to close the data. So scheduled and unscheduled, so it's like you're over and under. Which ones are under performing and which ones are going to overperform.
Can I ask that? If you just go back, can you then click to say increase the duration?
Yes. Yep. So I can click right into that requirement and then change the time, right? So it's giving me the link to take action on that. So I can open the work order up and I can go to, okay, what's that person's schedule look like today? I'm going to need to, I have a quick response group, like a floater, so I'm in Edinburgh. It might be me. I might be the senior tech, and I dispatch and manage the team. And so I might be we're in trouble. I'm going to go out in the field, and I'm going to go either help him, or I'm going to take care of the work order that's right after him, or I'm calling that next customer and saying, hey, we're going to be a little late. Is that okay? Or whatever. You're making those kind of intelligent decisions. So this is that balance when we get into scheduling, is that it's never like Cortana is smarter than you. It's never that the system is smarter than the people. The scheduling part is a giant math problem. And what we have are really smart engineers and people that know how to do the work. Managing the complexities of that math problem of which is the most optimal thing to stick in there and historically go back, like that's kept in the mind of people. And so to have, kind of an assisted system that kind of helps say, these are the problem children today, and enabling those folks to make the right decisions and helping them and keeping them focused on their product or the service that they're doing. That's the name of the game for us. And we always work to honor those guys and gals because they're the hardest people to find typically, right? They're the whether that's home inspectors or people that visit health and human services kind of folks, physical therapists. We have all sorts of folks that are doing this work out, and they're the heroes of the story. They're the folks that have the passion for that service that they're delivering or whatever they're doing out in the field. And so these systems can't ever be pushed as, oh, hey, we're going to reduce the number of people that you need. It's more about everybody's trying to grow their business with the same amount of resources that they have. So it's that. So where does universal resource scheduling fit into that? So inside of the Dynamics application, inside of Dataverse, you're able to make any entity schedulable. So I can make any entity behave like that work order that we have. You can enable that for any entity if a company has sales, field service, customer service, or project service automation. And that includes any custom entities that you create. So a common one would be, let's just use leads, for example. That's a pretty easy one to think. Let's say if I'm an insurance company, I get a lead for homeowners insurance, and I need to go follow up with that lead to go do a home inspection, to then give them a proposal. So I have this just very simple entity that is a location. Go to this house and perform a home inspection, kind of a thing. Very simple entity models, super simple. I don't need tasks. I don't need a bunch of other stuff. I might have to have some photos or something like that, but that's about it. So those would be the requirements. You're going to have people that are in the work doing the scheduling. I'm going to have dispatchers and coordinators and managers, and I want to see a unified schedule across the field that does that. So it came with field service. It replaced, as I mentioned, that legacy scheduling engine. I was in consulting. I started in CRM 1. So I worked with that scheduling engine for years, and I'm so glad we replaced it because that old one was really great for about 25 resources, not for 50,000 resources or any measure of any complexity. So it's a lot more efficient now. So anyways, sure.
On the previous slide, so if a customer buys sales only, they don't get URS?
Now I'm going to have to look now because I had this on the previous slide, didn't I? I had that on the previous slide. So yeah, and I pulled these right off our doc site too. So I believe if you have sales, you have universal resource scheduling. I'm pretty sure.
And if you don't have any dynamic 365 apps that have Dataverse,
yep.
with the Dataverse environment with the Dataverse database, you don't get URS.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
You've got to have an app.
Yep. I have another slide. I'll talk about that here in a sec because that's actually part of the vision that I wanted to kind of show you about how you could do something like this and not have a big Dynamics footprint, but have just a small Dynamics footprint.
Is the old scheduling thing actually removed now?
It's deprecated is the terminology we use. It's not removed because it's been around for a long time, and so customers are still using that for their purposes, so we can't just delete it. So but it's no longer a supported, we're not putting more stuff in there. And by default, it's kind of turned off. So if you have challenges with that old legacy version of it, it's, so there's still a couple pieces in there. I saw some of the branch, the business holidays, and some of the things are still in there that they still use part of those entity models. So this is the how to turn it on or off. You just go to, if you have this, one of the apps will be called resource scheduling. It's just an app in there. You just open up resource scheduling and there's an administrative part, and I can enable schedule for entities. There's a little setup wizard that basically creates a relationship between that booking and the resource requirement and the entity that I'm targeting. And there's a couple little things that come along for the ride. One of them is what we refer to as a booking status, right? So is it scheduled? So I'm blocking it in because you want to have kind of behaviors sometimes of pre-booking and and do I lock it in or not lock it in, and that kind of stuff. So you need to have something what's called statuses, the booking status, and there's an entity already and a bunch of out-of-the-box booking statuses that are in the system that you can use, and that can drive kind of behaviors for the system. And then date, territory, etc. So then from there, you just book stuff. There is a scheduling API that's underneath that too, and that you can call, and it actually takes into account, you turn on the Outlook stuff. It will also include resource availability in the API. So, but this is the idea, the Power Apps idea, that I can have, you have kind of these folks that do manage the schedule, and those would be my fully licensed, field service users. But Power Apps users do have create, update, and delete rights on work orders and cases out of the box. This is kind of not widely reported. It's in the license guide. So if you ever get called on this, it's in that Power Apps license guide, not in the Dynamics license guide. The case and work order are called restricted entities in the system, but we've opened them up for Power Apps. So this was a tough one. We fought for this out in the field because we do have these kinds of scenarios where I've got maybe contractors or customers or external users that I need to create or delete a case inside of the system. So if I'm an employee here of the university and my chair is broken, I need to create a work order for the chair, right? It's very simple. So I can make an employee Power App, and that allows that person to create a work order in the system. Then I've got scheduling, and I have this whole other work area where I do need to have that full functionality of, going on the schedule board and doing all that. I'm going to just update that thing back from the main system back into kind of the Power App user interface around the work order or case or custom entity that you've created. So this is a big area for us where there's opportunity in this to kind of do this. So I get all of that API in one schedule for everybody, all of the RSO, I can do all of this, but I also get all the cool Power Apps components together at the same time, where we're going to have external users, customer-facing apps, the customer and field service components from Microsoft, our first-party apps, contain all of these. It already has scheduling portals, customer self-scheduling, customers can create cases. We've had this stuff for years. So kind of the same idea, kind of get the best of both worlds. You can also turn on that kind of scheduling for Exchange. So if customers using a certain version of Exchange Online, they connect right back into the Dataverse as an entity in the Dataverse called appointments, and appointments show up on the schedule board. So as I was saying earlier in the API, when you call into that system to say what's a resource that's available to do this, it includes the appointments from Exchange and Outlook. So if somebody's in training and doesn't have a booking on their schedule, it will fill in the blank for a doctor visit or something like that they pulled in the system. So they show up. And as I mentioned, RSO kind of takes the whole thing to another level and automates all of that, but your custom entities can be done. So we do definitely have a bunch of customers that are doing that, where they have their contractors externally, they've got a Power App out there, they want to build this beautiful canvas, very curated, beautiful thing. Scheduling is one part of that experience. They might have a whole bunch of other things that they need, like here's legal contracts, and here's how you order stuff from us, and here's terms, there's just maybe a contractor, or like I was saying, an employee of this facility would have something like that. As Microsoft employee, we have that. So I have a facilities management application that if my light's broken, I can, and it creates a work order in the system, and I can see the status of that, and I can also make a time off request, and like all these unrelated things to scheduling, I can do the same thing within a Power App. So RSO just automates the back end of that. So, all right. Well, that comes to the end of this. I don't have a poem to tell you at the end, but if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to stay after. And any questions, you guys? Because we actually have 3 minutes, I think, don't we? What is the time? To 7? Yes. So.
You mentioned that Outlook appointments feeding in schedule board. We have lots of customers asking the other way around, which was deprecated a while ago.
Yes. I would, we plan to see maybe something like that next year on that. So yeah, there's definitely, it's on the drawing board.
Project scenario and field service.
Yeah.
But people want that stuff in their diary.
Yeah. Yeah. The challenge is the scalability of that and managing it because it pokes into another platform's application. And so there's, right. It's one thing to put it over there. It's another thing to synchronize them between the two. And that's kind of the challenging part of the scenario. There's IDs and stuff like that. There's a couple different blogs that are out there in the community that kind of show, yes, it's like a very complex, and so that's part of what's being considered and how to curate something like that for the community. Question?
RSO, there's been mentioned about it becoming available as a service and partly included in your service license.
Yeah, that was a bit of a mess up for us, wasn't it? Didn't we? We kind of, as they say, cocked that up a bit, didn't we? Yeah, that definitely admit totally here, because I was part of that grand conspiracy to try to get RSO included in the field service component, and that was being worked on internally, and it met through a whole bunch of gates, and we were ready to go. I think it was a year ago, and then literally the day of that spring release, it got all pulled back. So this is why product engineering doesn't like talking to salespeople, until after products are released. So that was what happened there, and I think you'll see something maybe from us on this again conversation in the spring release. So next spring, I don't know. We'll have a more definitive whether that will be part of it or it's unclear exactly what's going to happen, but it's being reconsidered. So. Correct. Yeah. It actually is an on-demand service that uses Azure Compute, Elastic Compute power. It's really interesting. One of the questions we always get is, hey, I want to model a job. How long does this take for that thing to run? And it's very hard to do a definitive answer to that, because as the compute load on that virtual machine system or that virtual set of services, as it happens, it spins up more compute power for it. So the more complicated the job is, the more compute power gets thrown at it. So it's the system, the fabric of it is an elastic compute system, but it is a black box, so it's pretty opaque. You kind of push the button, a bunch of stuff happens, and back comes results. That stuff that happens over there, there's no way to, I want to tweak that, I want tweaky bits in that, and a lot of folks are looking for that kind of set of components. So.
Yeah, the other scenario I've come across is working in the break-fix industry.
Mm-hmm.
Where you've got a whole number of engineers that have got a window during the day, so like afternoon looking, you want to squeeze an emergency breakdown in.
Mm-hmm.
How can I do that with something like RSO, so I'm still getting the optimization,
Mm-hmm.
but I want to schedule it for all those resources while someone's on the phone? Do I have to wait for RSO to do a run, or is there any?
So in the current version, in the current schedule board, you can run RSO on one resource. There's a single resource optimization, so I can double book somebody, basically take something off their schedule and then push the RSO, and then it will re-optimize that person's schedule. And we also have customers that are doing RSO super frequently, like 20 minutes, every 20 minutes, and scoping that down to only the next half a day's worth of work. So you kind of double book onto the schedule, and then I can take my Edinburgh, resources and just rerun that manually. And then, like you said, you have to wait for it to do it. So it's not ideal. These are some of the features requests that sitting in the backlog. That ends up, for folks that aren't familiar with the RSO, it's kind of like the Dilbert. There's a famous Dilbert comic where his engineer says, I've invented a time machine. And it's awesome. You get in the box, the time, and you go ahead in time 1 hour. And so you get in the box, but the machine takes so long to run and to do all the compute and calculation, it takes an hour to compute the time. So that's kind of one of those great, so that's the kind of scenario, I'm trying to optimize something every 20 minutes, but it takes 10 minutes for the engine to run. So So part of that is a challenge for us, definitely, definitely. There is a partner, and I'll pack up. We have a partner, a UK-based partner, Fast, Smart, and Lean, and they have a real-time scheduling engine, and that's one of the things that they do. They do a real-time, like you can just basically put it in the queue, and it will reorganize everybody's schedule. A lot of organizations are challenged with that kind of approach, primarily because they want their resources locked in and their customers locked in. So that, there's implications for that for many of our customers. But, all right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye, YouTube.